£40, said Baron Skewes, and I'll not go to 45. She's 24, she has a temper, and everybody from here to Trellan knows her father died owing money. 50, my lord, and the wagon team stays with me. 40 and the team, and you'll take it, Cardew, because there is nobody else asking. The man at the window said nothing. He had been standing there for 3/4 of an hour with his hat in his hand, in a plain brown coat with salt on the shoulders, and Mr. Josiah Cardew had looked at him twice and decided he was the mine captain's clerk, come about the set and could wait. He was in fact Lucian Trevane, 9th Duke of Pentreath, mineral lord of 4 parishes and of the ground under this house, and he had walked up from the quay with Captain Breer because he liked to see a place before he leased it, and he had already decided that he would remember this room for the rest of his life. There was a young woman at the desk in the corner. She had a cost book open in front of her and a pen in her hand, and she had gone on writing while the 2 men bargained in a small upright hand, without one wasted movement, as though the figures were the only thing in the room with any dignity left in it. It would be June before the Duke of Pentreath understood what he had put his name to that morning, and the undoing of it would cost him £400, his standing in 2 parishes, and every comfortable idea he had ever held about being a decent man. Merrin, said her uncle, come here and be looked at. She put down the pen and stood and came and was looked at. She was not tall. She had a grey stuff gown with ore dust in the weave of the cuff, and her hands were reddened at the knuckle from cold water, and she held her chin exactly level, which the Duke of Pentreath observed to be a thing that had been practised. Turn, said Skewes. No, said Merrin Cardew. She has a temper, said the Baron comfortably. 40 then. 40, said Cardew. He counted it onto the parlour table in gold, 1 coin at a time, and the sound of it went into the panelling and stayed there. Nobody drew a curtain. The scullery door was open, and a woman in it was scouring a pot and did not stop. Where does the money go? Said Merrin. That is not your affair. It is precisely my affair. It is the whole of my affair, since it appears to be me. She had not raised her voice. Wheel Verity owes £41 and some shillings to the Bowl Maidens for the December, January and February accounts. 11 women, uncle, who have dressed ore in the rain since Michaelmas and been paid in tickets. Put the £40 where it is owed, and I will not say another word this morning. Josiah Cardew went the colour of a brick. You will not stand there and make a public matter of, there is a clerk at your window, a captain in your yard, and Mrs. Grigg at your scullery door. It is a public matter already. Merrin turned and looked, for the first time, straight at the man in the brown coat, and the Duke discovered that he could not think of a single thing to say to her, which had not happened to him since he was 19. Sir, you have heard £40 counted for me. Will you carry the number down to the account house and let them do as they please with it? I will, said Lucian. Thank you, she said, and then, to her uncle, quite steadily, the banns, I suppose. Sunday. 3 Sundays, and done by June. Cardew was sweating. And you will not make difficulties, girl, because you know how the will stands. Your father left you £300 in my hand, and not a penny of it comes to you before you are 25 unless you marry with my consent. And the cottage at Praise is in my name, and old Grigg is in it, and she is 71, and she has nowhere. Refuse, and I will have that cottage let to a tinner's family by Lady Day, and my father's dole in the mine. There is no dole. Your father's 8th went into the partnership and out of it, and I have the papers, and you have seen them. I have seen a paper, said Merrin. Skewes laughed at that, and pushed the little pile of gold across the table, and said the thing that the Duke of Pentreath would afterwards be able to repeat word for word at any hour of any night for the rest of his life. Do not fret, Miss Cardew. A woman is not sold. A woman is only settled. It is her uncle who is paid. Then Cardew took a folded paper from the press and dipped pen and signed it, and Skewes signed after him, and Cardew looked round the room for a witness and saw a clerk in a brown coat at his window. You can write, I suppose? I can write. It is a receipt, said Josiah Cardew. £40 had and received. Sign under my lord's name. And the 9th Duke of Pentreath, who was in a hurry to be out of that room, and who wanted his hands to have something to do besides make a fist, took the pen and signed his name where he was told, without reading one word above it. L. Trevane. Nobody looked at it. Skews was putting on his gloves. Cardew was sweeping the gold back with the edge of his hand. Merrin Cardew had gone back to the desk and taken up the pen and begun, again, to write. Outside, in the yard, with the gulls going over and the sea flat and grey below the headland, Captain Breer said, "Well, your grace, how much of that did you hear?" "All of it. This parish always hears all of it." Breer spat. "She keeps that mind, sir. Books, assays, wages, the lot, and her uncle signs it. And now she is £40, and the whole of Praise will drink to it on Sunday and say what a good match, and there is not one soul in this county withstanding enough to stop it." "There is one," he said, "and he has just signed the paper." "The set falls in at Lady Day," Captain Breer said, "and there's not an adventurer in the county will put a shilling into Wheel Verity till they know who holds the ground. They'll all be up your stairs by Friday, sir." Josiah Cardew came on the Thursday in his good coat and brought his niece behind him to carry the cost book because he could not read it. The estate office at Pentreath looked down over the harbour and smelled of tar and paper, and the Duke sat behind the long table with Breer at his shoulder and let his visitor get as far as the second sentence. "And I may say, your grace, that the family have worked that bowl for 40 years, and if your grace will look kindly on a renewal at the old dues—" "We have met," said Lucian. Cardew stopped. "A week ago Tuesday in your parlour at about 10:30. You told me I could wait. Then you told me I could write." He turned a page in front of him. "You did not ask my name, so I shall give it to you now. Trevane. The ground your bowl stands in is mine to the low water mark, and so is the ground your house stands on, and so was the table you counted the money out upon." The Duke of Pentreath had a temper, and spent 19 years learning to keep it in a voice quite low and even, and the effect on Josiah Cardew was that of cold water poured slowly down the back of the neck. He went grey. He began 3 sentences. Behind him, standing straight-backed with the cost-book held against her, Merrin Cardew did not move a muscle of her face, and yet the Duke had the strongest impression that somewhere well behind her eyes something had sat down and put its feet up. "Now," he said, "the dues. You have been returning me a 15th of the ore sold. My grandfather's set says an 18th, and my father's rider says a 15th after the deep at it and a 12th before it. Which have you been paying, and on which tonnage?" Cardew opened the cost book and looked at it in the manner of a man looking into a well. "Miss Cardew," said Lucian, "you have the figures." "I have, sir." "Then give them to me and let your uncle rest." She gave them to him for 50 minutes. Tonnage raised, tonnage dressed, prices at the ticketings for 11 successive sales, the cost of powder, candles, timber and the whim horse, the dues paid on each, and the arithmetic of them. She did not embellish, and she never once looked at her uncle for leave. Breer, at the Duke's shoulder, made a small sound like a man watching a good horse. "You have paid me a 15th throughout," Lucian said at the end of it, "and by the rider you owed me a 12th on 4 of those parcels, and nobody has ever caught it, including my own office. That is £90 and some shillings owing to me." "Your Grace," Cardew began. "Which I shall not ask for," said the Duke. "I shall have it in another coin. Miss Cardew, what would you have me put into the new set?" The room went quiet. It was, he was aware, an outrageous question to ask in front of the man who had the disposal of her, and he asked it deliberately and watched her decide whether to take it. She took it. 3 covenants, sir." She set the cost book down on the table and put a hand flat on it. "First, that wages at Wheel Verity be paid monthly in coin, and not in tickets on the account house shop, which are worth 9 pence in the shilling, and are the reason 11 women have not been paid since Michaelmas. Second, that the arrears owing to the dressing floors, £41, 6 shillings, be a first charge on the next ticketing, before the adventurers take a penny and before your Grace takes a penny. Third, that the set may be forfeited if either covenant is broken, and that the forfeiture be tried at the stannary court and not at my uncle's table." "You are asking me to put a whip into my own hand," said Lucian. "I am asking you to put it where somebody will use it." "Granted," he said. "All 3. Breer, draw it so, and let it be signed on Lady Day, and let the £41 go down to the dressing floors within the week, or the set does not issue at all." Josiah Cardew made a noise. Nobody attended to it. 11 women were paid on the 14th of March at the account-house door in coin in the rain, and one of them, a widow with a hand like a bundle of sticks, asked who had done it, and was told by Captain Breer, at length, twice, in a voice that carried up the valley. That evening the Duke of Pentreath sat alone in his office with 2 papers in front of him. One was the cost-book page Merrin Cardew had copied out for him, the small upright hand, the figures in their columns, the loops of the sevens crossed in the old way. The other was an assay report from Wheel Verity, 3 years old, one of 11 such reports that had come into the Pentreath estate office since he came into the title, each of them signed J. Cardew at the foot. The hand was the same hand. It had been the same hand for 3 years, on every paper by which his own dues had been reckoned, in an office where nobody had ever thought to ask who was holding the pen. He sat there a long while with the 2 sheets side by side, and could not for the life of him work out how a woman who had been doing his arithmetic for 3 years came to be worth £40 in her uncle's parlour, or why the number had lodged in him like a splinter under a nail. "Your Grace is on the dressing floors again," Merrin said, without looking up from the buddle. "That is the 4th time in a fortnight. The Bull maidens have begun to lay wagers." "On what?" "On whether it is the oar." She straightened and pushed the hair off her forehead with her wrist, because her hands were red to the elbow with slurry. "It is not the oar, sir. The oar is poor, and you have known it since March. The oar is poor and getting poorer, and the deep at it wants driving another 40 fathoms, and I am not here about the oar." He had said it before he had decided to. "I have altered a thing in my office. Every assay report that comes to Pentreath is now to be signed at the foot by the person who made it, not by the adventurer, by the hand that did the work. That will make trouble for me. It has already made trouble for you. Your uncle came up on Monday to explain that his niece had been permitted to help him with his letters. And what did your Grace say?" "That I was obliged to him for the loan of her arithmetic, and would be sending him a bill for the last 3 years of it." Lucian watched her fly at her mouth and lose. It was the first time he had seen her smile, and he found it had an unreasonable effect for so small a thing. "Miss Cardew, what became of your father's will?" The smile went. She took up the shovel again. "My father died in the November of the year 8. He had a dole in Wheel Verity, 1/8 part, and he was particular about it, 'cause it was all there was. He made a will in the spring before he died, and he told me what was in it, and he told Mrs. Grigg too, and he said the dole was mine at 25 or at my marriage, whichever came first, and my uncle was to hold it and be paid for holding it." The shovel went into the buddle and came up. "6 weeks after the funeral my uncle showed me a deed of partnership by which my father had sold his 1/8 into the firm for £200. It is dated the 2nd of October, year 8. My father was in his bed from the August and could not hold a pen." "Then it is a forgery, and it can be tried." "By whom, sir?" "There are 2 attorneys at Trellan. One is my uncle's and the other draws Lord Skews's leases, and neither will look at a girl with no money who wants to call a magistrate's friend a forger." She said it without self-pity, as a person states the depth of a shaft. "And the paper is at Trellan somewhere, enrolled, with witnesses, and I have never been let inside the same room as it. And if you were?" "Then I should read it," said Merrin Cardew, "and I should know in 1 minute what was done, because I have my father's hand by heart, and because a man who steals with a pen always steals twice." He walked her as far as the stile, which was as far as she would let him. The cliff path was full of thrift, and the sea was doing its evening business below, and he was aware of walking slowly on purpose, which was not a thing he did. "You may as well say it," she said at the stile. "Say what?" "Whatever you have been carrying up and down these floors for a fortnight." "You are a duke, sir, and I am a Bull girl with a pen, and the parish can see this path from 3 chapels. Do not walk here with me unless you mean something by it. And you cannot mean anything by it, because I am called in church on Sunday for the 3rd time, and after that I am Lord Skews's business and not my own. And if the banns were stopped—" "They will not be stopped," she said, "by anybody but me. And I have counted what stopping them costs, and it is an old woman's roof, and I cannot pay it. Good evening, your Grace." Baron Skewes came to Pentreath on the 2nd of June, and did not wait to be shown up. I am told, he said, that your grace has taken an interest in my property. Say the word again. It is the correct word, and we are both men of business. Skewes sat down without being asked. Let me be plain, since your grace is plain. Her father died owing £180 on a bond. I hold that bond. I bought it from a merchant at Trellan for 60. There is a cottage at Praise with an old woman in it that I can have on a warrant any Tuesday I please. And there is a will and a partnership deed, which are Cardew's business and none of mine, and which I have never read, and which I am not obliged to read, because a wife's property is her husband's from the hour they leave the church, and no court in England will trouble itself further. So the 8th part is the whole of it. The 8th part is the whole of it. Will verity is poor, but the ground beside it is not, as your grace knows better than anybody, being the man who owns it. When the deep adit is driven, that 8th is worth £8,000, and it will be mine on the 18th of June at 11 o'clock in the morning at Praise Church, by licence, without banns, since the bonds have served their turn, and I do not care to wait. He put on his gloves. Your grace may buy tin from me afterwards. I shall not be difficult about the price. Get out of my house. With pleasure. Skewes paused at the door, entirely good-humoured. Do not put yourself to trouble over her, sir. Every man in this county has had the same 3 weeks your grace has had, and every one of them has done the sum and come out at the same answer. She is £40 to her uncle and 8,000 to me. There is nothing in between. There never is. The 18th of June, 11 o'clock. Praise Church. Stand there and say nothing, Merrin told him, and try to look like a man who does not care what the price is. It was the ticketing at Trellan on the 5th of June, the long room over the ship, and the copper samples were laid out in their papers down the middle of the table, while the smelters' agents wrote their bids and folded them. Wheel Verity had 11 tons of poor stuff to sell and 11 women to pay out of it. Lucian stood where he was put and said nothing, and looked as though he did not care, and Merrin Cardo read the samples with her thumb and tongue and the little iron spoon, and set her reserve, and got £4.7 a ton when Captain Brea had told her to be glad of £3.15. There, she said afterwards on the stairs, flushed to the ears, £48 for 11 tons of rubbish, and the dressing floors paid to Midsummer. You enjoyed that. I have never in my life been allowed to enjoy anything so much. They walked out into a warm grey drizzle that came in off the sea, and stood a while under the arch by the market house, and it was there, with the water running off the slates and the ore dust still on her wrists, that the Duke of Pentreath said the thing he had been carrying up and down the dressing floors since March. Skewes told me there is nothing in between. £40 to your uncle, 8,000 to him, and nothing in between. He is a horrible man, and he is not stupid. He is wrong, said Lucian. There is something in between. I am standing in it. She looked at him for a long moment. The rain went on doing what rain does. Then say it to me, she said, and not for me. Whatever you mean, whatever you do, let it be said to my face and not settled in the next room while I write in a book. That is the whole of what was done to me in March, sir. 2 men in a parlour and me in the corner, and my price agreed before I was called over to be looked at. If you ever do business about me instead of with me, you will be no different, whatever the figure is. I understand you. I hope you do. He took her hand there, under the arch, and held it in both of his for the space of perhaps a dozen heartbeats, with the ore dust and the rain and the smell of the harbour, and neither of them said anything, and afterwards he could remember the exact weight of it. 5 days later he did business about her in the next room. He told himself afterwards that he had had reasons and that the reasons had been good ones. The licence was for the 18th. The bond of £180 could be enforced any Tuesday. The cottage at Praise had an old woman in it. He rode into Trellan on the 10th of June and sat down in a private room at the Ship with Baron Skewes and Josiah Cardew, and bought the bond at its face and paid Skewes £220 to give up the licence and the marriage articles, and took an assignment of the cottage, and paid the whole of it, £400, in notes on a Truro bank, across a table in front of a landlord who was bringing in the brandy. He had meant to ride to Nanskove the next morning with the bond in one hand and the cottage deed in the other and tell her she was free. The parish had it by 9 that night. She came to Pentreath herself in the morning, on foot 7 miles, with her boots wet to the ankle, and she would not sit down. £400, she said. I bought a bond that could have put your father's name in a court and an old woman on the road. You bought me off him. Say the sentence as the parish is saying it, sir, because they are saying it in 3 chapels and at the account house and on the quay. The Duke of Pentreath has bought Miss Cardew off Lord Skewes for £400. That is my name now. That is what I am for the rest of my life in this county. A thing with a price that went up. She was shaking, not weeping. And I told you, 5 days ago under the market house with your hands round mine, I told you the one thing. Say it to me and not for me. Did anybody ask me? Did one man in that room say, we had better send for her, she can read, she can reckon, it is her life? No, said Lucian Trevane. Nobody did. No, she said, and you were the last man in Cornwall I thought would need telling twice. I am obliged to you for Mrs. Grigg's roof, Merrin said at the door, and I shall repay the £180 of my father's bond if it takes me 20 years, and I will not touch the other 220, because that was never a debt, it was a purchase. And I am not goods. She put her hat straight. Good morning, your grace. He gave her 3 days because he was a coward. On the 14th he rode down to Nantskove and found Mrs. Grigg on the step of the cottage at Praise with her apron over her hands. Gone, sir. Tuesday morning on the Trellan carrier. Gone where? She'd not say. She took her father's letter case and 11 shillings and my black bonnet, because hers is a fright. The old woman looked at him with 71 years of opinion in her face. She said, tell his grace nothing, and then she said, no, tell him this, and I've had it by heart since Tuesday, so mind you take it. She said she has gone to read a paper, and she'll not be bought out of a room again. She is in Trellan, sir, Captain Breer said, and I'm to tell you she does not want fetching. Where in Trellan? Lodging over a smelter's widow in Chapel Street at 2 shillings the week, and reckoning the ticketing books for Polglaze the merchant at 8 shillings. And she has been every day but Sunday at the registry and the stannary office, and she has paid for every paper she has looked at, and she would not let Polglaze advance her a penny of the 8 shillings before Saturday. Breer turned his hat round. The whole town knows her by now. They call her the Wheel Verity maid. She goes in at 9, sir, and comes out when they shut the door on her. Lucian Trevane discovered at 41 what it is to be a man with £400 and no possible use for it. He could not go to her. That was the plain fact of it, and it took him 3 days to get his arms round it. Every road he could think of ended in a duke arriving somewhere with money and a solution, and she had told him under the market house at Trellan exactly what that was worth, and she had been right, and there was nothing to do but let her walk in at 9 and come out when they shut the door. What he did instead was ask Mrs. Grigg to teach him her father's hand, and read 4 years of Wheel Verity cost books, and get the deep adit surveyed at his own charge, and none of it, he was aware, was any use to anybody but himself. The stannary court sat at Trellan on the 15th of June in a long panelled room over the coinage hall, with the steward at the head, a jury of tinners on the benches, and the whole of the trade standing at the back for the entertainment. Merrin Cardew had entered her plaint on the 9th in her own name, having been told by 2 attorneys that she had no business there. She came into that room in a black bonnet that did not fit her, with a bundle in a cloth, and she took the plaintiff's place at the end of the table and put her hands flat on it and waited to be spoken to. The Duke of Pentreath stood at the back among the smelter's agents and did not go forward, because there was nothing on earth she could have wanted less. You are Merrin Cardew, spinster of praise? I am. And you claim a dole of 1/8 part in the ball called Wheel Verity against Josiah Cardew, your uncle and guardian. Cardew's attorney was on his feet at once. It went on for 20 minutes, that a woman under guardianship could not sue her guardian. That the 1/8 part had passed by a deed of partnership in the year 8, that the plaintiff was a young person of no substance, who had been put up to this by parties with an interest in the ground, that the court had better things to do. Have you any answer, Miss Cardew? 3, sir. She untied the cloth. The first is a copy of my father's will, proved by my uncle himself in the Archdeaconry Court at Trellan on the 11th of February in the year 9. I paid 5 shillings and 6 for it on Thursday, and here is the registrar's receipt for the money. By that will my father gives his 8th part in real verity to me, at 25 or at my marriage, whichever falls first, and appoints my uncle to hold it, and be paid £12 a year for holding it. The room stirred. The second is my uncle's own deed of partnership, dated the 2nd of October, year 8, by which my father is made to sell that same 8th part for £200. My uncle proved a will in February giving away a thing he swears my father had already sold in October. He cannot have both, sir. If the deed is good, he proved a false will and took £12 a year for 11 years for holding nothing. If the will is good, and he swore to it on the book, then the deed is waste paper. The steward of the court took off his spectacles and put them on again. And the third. The third is a paper I have never been permitted to see, and I ask the court to call for it now. It is enrolled in this building. It was enrolled on the 20th of March last, and it is the paper my uncle signed in his parlour on the 10th of March, in front of me when Lord Skewes counted £40 onto our table for me. I have been 11 days trying to get sight of it, and I have paid the office 2 shillings a day, and here are the 11 tickets. She set them out on the table in a row, one for each day, the way a person lays out coins, and the room went quiet enough to hear the gulls on the roof. They brought the enrolment book in and opened it, and the steward read the entry aloud. It was not a receipt. It was a deed of assignment made between Josiah Cardew, guardian and trustee of the one part, and the Baron Skewes of the other, whereby the said Josiah, in consideration of £40 paid and of the intended marriage, assigned to the said Baron all the right, title, interest and expectancy of Merrin Cardew, spinster, in the dole of 1/8 part in the bowl called Wheel Verity, to hold to him and his heirs whether the marriage took effect or not. Whether the marriage took effect or not, the steward repeated. Then he has it still, Merrin said. Her voice did not change. The Duke at the back heard the exact place where it should have. My Lord Skewes gave up the licence and kept the 8th. He was never buying a wife at all. Sir, is that deed good? It bears every appearance of being good, Miss Cardew. It is under hand and seal, it is enrolled, and it is properly witnessed. Witnessed by whom, sir? The steward ran his finger down the page. By one witness only, he said, a gentleman. The name is written L. Trevane. That is my name, said the Duke of Pentreath from the back of the room, and I should like to be sworn. The whole court turned. He came up the middle of it between the smelter's agents, gave his name and his style to the steward, took the book, and did not look at Merrin Cardew, because he had not earned it. On the 10th of March last I was in Mr. Cardew's parlour at Nanskov upon my own business, about the set. I was there 3/4 of an hour, and nobody asked my name. I heard the Baron Skewes offer £40 for the marriage of this lady, and her uncle ask 50, and the two of them settle at 40. I heard the money counted on the table. I heard my Lord Skewes say, and I will give the court his words exactly, that a woman is not sold, a woman is only settled, and it is her uncle who is paid. When the paper was signed, Mr. Cardew looked round for a witness and found me, and asked whether I could write. He told me it was a receipt for £40. I asked no questions and signed my name under my lord's without reading a word above it, because I wanted to be out of the room and my hands wanted something to do. That signature is the only witness on that deed. It is a duke's name, and it is the reason the enrolment office took it without a second thought. He set the book down, and I will say the rest plainly, since I am on oath, and it can do me no good. On the 10th of this month I sat in a private room at the Ship in this town and paid £400 to the same 2 men for the release of the same lady, without asking her, without telling her, with the landlord going in and out with the brandy. There were 3 men in the buying of Miss Cardew this spring, sir. I was the 3rd and I was the dearest, and the only thing to be said for me is that she walked 7 miles the next morning to tell me so to my face. The steward looked at him for some time. Your Grace understands that this evidence goes to the whole of your own conduct. It goes to the whole of it. That is why it is worth anything at all. The jury of tinners took under half an hour. They found the will proved in the year 9 to be the true will of the deceased. The deed of partnership of October, year 8, to have been made after the testator was past holding a pen, and to be sent to the sessions for further inquiry. The assignment of the 20th of March to have been procured by a false representation of its nature to the only witness of it, and therefore void. And the dole of 1/8 part in wheel verity to stand in the name of Merin Cardew, spinster, and to have stood there since her father's death. Baron Skewes' attorney gave up the assignment before the room had emptied, his client having no appetite for the sessions. My lord left Cornwall by the Thursday coach and was afterwards heard of at Boulogne. Josiah Cardew was ordered to account for 11 years at £12 a year, lost the captaincy of the Bal, and went to live with his wife's people at Camborne, and the parish enjoyed itself about it for a very long time. In the middle of that noise a young woman in a black bonnet that did not fit her stood up at the end of the table with her hands flat on the wood, and 11 women from the dressing floors, who had come 14 miles in a cart, stood up at the back and made a noise you could hear on the quay. "Sir," said Merin Cardew, when they let her speak, "the £40 is in the court's hands with the rest of the papers. My father's dole is my own, and I am obliged to the jury for it. But the £40 was the price of me, and I asked in March that it be paid where it was owed. 3 months' wages are owing on the dressing floors of that Bal. Pay it there to the last shilling, and I shall have had a very fair spring." He came to Chapel Street the next morning instead, and stood in the road, and sent up word, and waited until she came down to the step herself. "One thing to your face, and then I go home," he said. "I have taken out a licence in my own name. It lies at Praise Church. I shall be at the altar there on the 18th of June at 11 o'clock, which is the day and the hour they set for you without asking. Nothing is bought. The bond is burnt, the cottage is conveyed to you outright, and is yours whatever you do, and your 1/8 part is yours by the finding of a jury and owes nothing to me. If you do not come, I shall stand there till noon and go home, and no man in this county will ever hear a word of complaint from me about it. And if I do come, then you will have walked in on your own feet," said Lucian, "with nobody paid." The 18th of June was fine and windy. Praise Church was full to the Tower Arch, because a wedding cried 3 times in a Cornish parish does not go to waste, and because everybody from Trellan to the headland had heard what was said in the coinage hall and would not miss the sequel for money. The Duke of Pentreath was at the altar at 11 o'clock with a licence in his pocket, no settlement drawn, nothing agreed, and Captain Brea at his shoulder saying nothing extremely loudly. At 4 minutes past, the door at the west end went, and the parish turned round. She came up the aisle by herself, in the grey stuff gown with the ore dust in the weave of the cuff, and Mrs. Griggs' black bonnet, and 11 Bal maidens standing in the aisle-end pews in clean aprons. And she walked the whole length of that church at the same unhurried pace she had walked into the stannary court, and looked at nobody but the man waiting for her. "Nobody has been paid a penny for me this morning," she said, when she reached him. "Nobody," said Lucian. "Then I am not settled," said Merin Cardew, and put her hand into his. "I am married. The deep edit at Wheel Verity was driven the following spring and cut a load at 40 fathoms that paid the parish for 11 years. The assays that went up to the Pentreath office were signed at the foot by the person who had made them, and the wages went down to the dressing floors monthly in coin, and the £40 was paid over to the last shilling on a wet Friday and drunk to in 3 chapels afterwards, which the vicar affected not to know. They lived at Pentreath above the harbour, where there was a long table in the estate office by the window, and of a winter evening the Duke sat at one end of it with the set books and his wife at the other with the cost books. And the tar and the paper and the sea smelled exactly as they had on the day she first came up those stairs behind her uncle, carrying a book he could not read. The only real difference, as her husband was fond of observing to anybody who would listen, was that now the parish came up the stairs and asked for her.